All right. So, whoops. The first thing I didn't know that when a month begins on a Sunday, that means you're going to have a Friday the 13th. And each year there's at least one Friday the 13th, and some years as many as 3, but no more. And so this year we had our first one on March 13th, and our second one is today.
Yeah.
Anybody want to take a crack at the pronunciation?
Triskaidekaphobia.
Yeah, triskaidekaphobia, pretty good. So that's just the fear of number 13, and there's more people who have that. They did a survey. I'll show you the statistics about how many people in North Carolina, or I think they did that for the US, and then Friday the 13th in North Carolina as a state. How about the second one? Has anybody ever heard of that one or want to give a crack at a pronunciation? So I'll do it. I'll try it. Paraskevedekatriophobia. So that's fear of Friday the 13th.
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah. So I practiced a little saying it because I wanted to look it up, to show you guys. So I had to keep typing it in. So as I'm typing it in, I'm thinking like, how do you say this? So and here I want to show you the video. Hopefully this works good. Let me know if you sound or any problems with this.
13. We've built office blocks and condominiums with 12th and 14th floors, but no 13th. And Winston Churchill, considered by many to be one of the most rational and pragmatic historical figures, refused to sit in the 13th row at the theater. Even some airlines like Continental, Air France, and Ryanair don't have a 13th row. We both fear and respect the number 13, but just what is triskaidekaphobia, the fear of the number 13, and where does it originate from? Today we'll find out. In this episode of the Infographic Show, why are we afraid of Friday the 13th and the number 13? First of all, we must consider the number 12 as the perfect number. The ancient Sumerians produced a numeral system based on the number 12 that we still enjoy today. Calendars have 12 months, the day is halved by 2 sets of 12, 12 is a whole, complete, perfectly divisible number. So why then is 13 so sinister? Is it just that 12 is so ideal that we must find something inherently bad in 13? As any theology student will tell you, there were 13 disciples at the Last Supper, and the 13th person to take his seat was probably Jesus, although some say it was the backstabbing Judas who took chair number 13. Whoever took that last 13th seat came to a sticky end. Matthew says that Judas committed suicide after the crucifixion, while the early Christian leader Papias says that Judas walked around in the world a sad example of impiety, for his body having swollen to such an extent that he could not pass where a chariot could pass easily. So Judas may well have grown to a size 13. The Last Supper took place on the 13th day of the month, and the crucifixion occurred on Friday the 13th. The Knights Templar, protectors of the Holy Grail, the cup Jesus drank from at the ominous shindig, were all slaughtered on order from Pope Clement on, yes, Friday the 13th. 13 is also an unlucky number if you find yourself unfortunate or guilty enough to be sentenced to hang for a crime. There were 13 long steps up to the gallows and only one short cut down. A coven of witches has 13 members, and if there are 13 letters in your name, you are surely cursed to damnation. Jack the Ripper, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Charles Manson all had 13 letters in their birth names. And it's not just on planet Earth that the number 13 is considered unlucky. Apollo 13, the 7th manned mission in the Apollo space program, was launched in 1970 from the Kennedy Space Center, but the lunar landing was aborted after an oxygen tank exploded, and the astronauts were lucky to return to Earth 6 days later with their lives intact. Even in space, the number 13 is the unluckiest number. In tarot, the 13th card in the deck is death. To draw the death card in the tarot doesn't mean that you will die straight away. Death in the tarot sense is more about change, rebirth, and creation. But if you do draw the death card on the 13th day of the month, and see a black cat crossing your path, and the moon is full, and you happen to be superstitious, you may potentially have an unlucky day. But you probably won't die, not that day anyway. But why is Friday considered the unlucky day? In biblical terms, Friday has had a checkered history. Jesus was crucified, and Eve tempted Adam on a lazy Friday afternoon, Abel was slain by Cain, and the great floods began on a Friday. Farewell either. Citizens were
When we think of a Bloody Mary, some of us may picture the spicy cocktail, the one containing vodka and tomato juice. Others may best know Bloody Mary from the ghostly folklore. You know the one. Step in front of a mirror and chant her name repeatedly. Upon uttering her name,
I it skipped to something else. I'm not sure. Did the video stay good throughout that? The audio, I mean?
Mhm.
Yes,
I'm getting no audio. Oh, here's I go. Okay. So did everybody?
Saying her name only twice. Mary has
Sorry.
long been perceived as a feared figure, and there's a reason history.
were executed in Rome on a Friday, and also on a Friday in Britain, people were usually hung, meaning that on Saturday, people were usually hung over after merrily watching one of their fellow men be eliminated the night before. Fridays in theological and historical texts usually spells bad news. The number 13 isn't totally unlucky wherever you go in time and history. The ancient Egyptians considered 13 fortuitous. China has a deep fear of the number 4, the Japanese avoid the number 9, and the unluckiest number in Italy is 17. Indians have a deep distrust of 26, and in Bulgaria, the number 088, 888, 8888 is the one to be most terrified of all numbers following the acquisition of that jinxed phone number by a number of high-profile people who subsequently died according to urban myth. The former US flag had 13 red and white stripes and 13 stars representing the first 13 colonies that founded the country. Christopher Columbus landed on the Western Hemisphere on October 13th, although deliberately changed the official date to the 12th of October to avoid the scandal of a cursed landing. Sikh religion believes the number 13 is special. In Punjabi, 13 translates to yours, or I am yours, my lord, and is considered divinely lucky. Moreover, in bakery circles, 13 is also considered lucky. A baker's dozen, or 13, is the ordinarily 12 with 1 added, just for luck. The number 13 also represents femininity, as the number of lunar or menstrual cycles in a year is often around 12 or 13. In China, women make offerings of mooncakes with the number 13 imprinted on them, as 13 denotes blood, fertility, and lunar potency, and good luck from the great female goddess. 13 represents the life cycle and the rhythm of nature and the moon. So although considered unlucky by some, the number 13 represents the very thing that brought us all here to watch this episode, so perhaps 13 isn't that unlucky after all. So what do you think about the number 13? Lucky or unlucky? Let us know why in the comments. Also,
Go again. So did the sound come through okay? No? Okay. All right.
yeah, no problem for me.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I was thinking that was interesting.
Yeah.
That it just
be sure to check out
whoops,
our other video called Tap.
came from wherever. And, like I said, I had talked to my mom about, did we ever talk about, the number 13 or Friday the 13th? And she said, no, she never thought about it. She never talked about it with me. And we didn't, but somehow I picked that up. And I think we do pick it up almost like memes. The big thing is memes, and it kind of gets into your consciousness. And I do, like I said, I don't have any feeling about today being a bad day. In fact, it looks like a really nice day, and I'm glad to see all of you here. And I don't anticipate any great disaster. I think I turned the oven off and everything's fine. But I still think about the number 13, and I think about Friday the 13th. And I'm going to show in some more slides some other superstitions that I've come across and that just kind of come into my brain and are maybe don't sway me in any particular way, but it does change people's behavior, and a certain amount of people do have trouble with it, real fear and anxiety, and most don't, but some do. So have any of you had any of you do fear the number 13 or Friday or feel Friday the 13th is not a good day to plan anything and you just decided to come here?
My stepdad really believed that bad things were happening to him on the 13th. Like,
Yeah,
would name probably 5, 6 examples
right.
of like this happened to me on the 13th and this happened on the 13th. So when my sister was going to be born and she was late and they offered to induce on the 13th, he said over my dead body, and was induced on the 14th, and she was so late. I think there was no amniotic fluid left whatsoever. She was born like yellow, and so one day could have, she's healthy and everything.
Everything worked out.
So
Yeah.
like 13th is not a good day for my daughter to be born.
Yeah.
He actually could tell you, quite a few examples
Yeah.
of what happened on the 13th.
And I think that's what happened. It seems like what happens with those memes and the superstitions is that things, out of kind of, the mathematics of the situation, that you can find were a lot of things. People were very squeamish about launching ships. So sailors especially were aware of the 13th, and 13th was not a good launch date, and as you heard in the video, it was not a decent arrival date either. So, they kind of just avoided that day of the month. So, and I'll share with you some more. Let's see. So, it's not a terrible amount of people. Like it's somewhere at under 10% report in the United States that they're afraid of Friday the 13th. But a greater number of people just are not comfortable with the number 13th. And that's a 25% is the statistics from that particular state, North Carolina. Where they survey people. So I don't know if that's indicative of the whole United States, but there's definitely, a significant number of people who say, I just don't like doing something on Friday the 13th. I don't like the number 13th. I wouldn't invite 13 people over for dinner. And, so there's some significance. And so I especially saw, which makes sense, people, knowing that you're going to have a certain percentage of those people, airport terminals, hotels, and hospitals, just sometimes get rid of that number 13 so they don't have a problem with that. And some fairly famous people. Franklin Roosevelt wasn't a big, it wasn't a dominant thing of Friday the 13th, but it did, he was a person who was affected by that. And,
Paul, on your elevator, where'd 14 go?
I don't know.
I mean,
I'm wondering if it's kind of weird. I wonder
it skipped two layers there, 2 floors.
Yeah. So
the 4 is missing too.
Eliminated that whole row. Yeah.
And a -1 floor, that's I don't know.
Yeah.
Lower level.
Yeah.
Lower level, yeah.
That's the parking lot, I think, underneath the basement.
Right. Yeah, usually they do P or B, but that's interesting. Yeah.
I wonder if Friday the 13th or that kind of fear breaks out according to political orientation. That is, I wonder if conservatives or liberals are more inclined to have a fear of those kinds of things.
I did not come across that. But I don't know. It could be, I suppose it could be, there could be some holdover from, this issue that some of it was through the 13 people at the supper, that more religious people are more aware of that and the reasons why that would be an inauspicious day.
Yeah.
That it came, that was, and it was in a couple novels. There was a thing written about Friday the 13th, and there were some other people who took it up. And kind of like Maya said, there were just famous people who kind of came across, various historical events or personal events and thought, well, this there's something to this. And so that kind of gets into the consciousness of people. And I don't know, whether there's a good study about who's more susceptible. There have been some studies about whether or not it correlates with people that have compulsive disorders. And there was some kind of correlation with that. And and there is some research being done about whether or not people that are more phobic have different types of chemical composition in their brain, or have some different structures or ways that their brain is communicating, because there does seem to be something going on, but it's hard to say across the board. Yeah, so it just got me thinking of other there's whole lists of things that people are phobic of, and things that one of the reasons that I thought it was just kind of caught my attention was because it's something that got inside my brain, like I said, but I don't know where it came from. It's just kind of like in the air. And I just like the number 13, sometimes would give me a pause. The other thing that would give me a pause would be the black cat. And, I know that some people, I've been even walking with friends or something, and a black cat would come and somebody would push me aside, so I wouldn't be afflicted by that. And it turns out that this black cat, actually, some of the stuff started as a auspicious type of thing and a supernatural thing, that in Egypt, when they first started growing wheat and other crops, that they started to have a lot of pest problems, and they found out that the best solution to their pest problems was felines. And because they were so good at doing this, very necessary function, they became deities with supernatural powers in Egypt, and even became this Bast, that's the name of a specific deity cat. But there was an interesting turn, even though the cat, was such a useful, thing for them and so revered. It also eventually resulted in prohibitions not to mess with this deity and this revered creature. And then it turned into some fear of the creature itself. And that's probably part of the legacy that we have of the black cat. So anybody have experience with the black cat, or have friends or relatives?
Russians even have a song about not crossing the road when there's a black cat. There's a song, the black cat. And it's a big superstition in Russia. Russians have a lot of superstitions, actually, when you think about it. And no one really believes in them anymore, I think, but everyone remembers them. Like mirror and stepping over the threshold, and like not shaking your hand over the threshold, and not looking in the broken mirror, and not crossing the road where there's a black cat and stuff. Like there's a ton of
So
when I was growing up in Kansas City, we had a pet black cat, jet black, called him Midnight. That's the most unusual cat that I've ever seen. For example, when a dog's in the neighborhood would chase him, normally when a dog comes after a cat, the cat runs away, right? But this cat, even if it was a fairly big dog, instead of running away, this cat would just crouch down in the grass and wait. And the dog would get closer, and pretty soon the dog would start slowing down. And when the dog got fairly close, the cat would spring right at the dog and chase him up the street, nipping at his heels as he went. And I'd never seen a cat do that before. And my dad would be laying down in his chair, kind of resting, and this cat would come up and nip his hand. And when he did, my dad would whack the cat across the head, and the cat would turn around, and pretty soon he'd come back and do it again. And when he would bite, nip at my dad's hand, then he would flinch and wait, because he knew he was going to get whacked. And he didn't try to avoid it or anything. It became kind of a game with the cat, that he'd come up and bite my dad's hand, and my dad would whack him, and the cat would take the flint, and pretty soon he'd do it again. It's the weirdest cat I'd ever seen.
Yeah. Huh. Well, maybe some supernatural powers in that cat. Yeah.
Where does that, it's been in some notable films, including As Good as It Gets, a fear of stepping on the cement, the line that separates
Yeah.
blocks of, where does that come from?
I'm not sure, but I remember the saying, "Step on a crack, break my mother's back." And for a
Yeah.
while, when I was a kid, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes I would get nervous because I would, you know, be walking and I'd forget about it, you know, and I do know that some of us kids would, you know, alter our gait to make sure we didn't step on too many cracks. And now it would be especially important as my mom has very severe osteoarthritis and osteoporosis.
Hmm.
So, yeah. So I don't know where that comes from, and I just think it's kind of fascinating that we don't know where a lot of them come from, but some of them will, you know, like for instance the thing about the number 13. There was also a 13th person that showed up with a bunch of Greek gods congregating, and there was a killing also at that dinner. And so there's a real big thing about 13 people at a dinner. But some of these things happen, you know, many thousands of years ago, and they just, you know, the story kind of hung on, and then it got added to, and you wind up with it just kind of being in the ether and picking up on it. And it seems like a lot of those things, you know, a lot of these things have, you know, some kind of slow history, almost like you know, like the start of the Mississippi River, starting at a couple, you know, with a couple ponds and a couple seeps and you know, a little area where it starts, and then it just keeps going through the years. So I think it's an interesting thing that some of these superstitions have in common. And the other one that I thought was kind of interesting that you know, had made me nervous as a kid, and my mom said, well, that the reason why is because it's a stupid thing. Why would you walk under a ladder? And, and I agree with her, you know, especially if somebody has some paint or something.
There's somebody up there painting.
So
with a
yeah,
bucket of paint.
exactly. So there's some practicality to it, but there also is plenty of lore around the ladder. And I did, you know, find out that this triangle seems to be a symbolic thing about the triangle with that includes spirits, evil and other types of spirits within this triangle. And that was why one of the things that kind of gave fuel to the fire about walking under a ladder, that you're tempting fates by means.
Paul, excuse
I
me,
don't know
Paul.
if you, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I asked about the origin of if you step on a crack.
Yeah.
And it says one origin is based on the presence of mythological demons living underneath the ground. Yeah, and the other one is a testament to the fact that our demons come from within. So the darker superstition is equivalent to inviting suffering upon ourselves. There are some other background too.
Yeah. So did it give like a period of time when some of that discussion began?
It doesn't say it what I'm seeing, it doesn't say.
Yeah, it's interesting.
If they come up through the cracks in the sidewalk, they must be fairly recent. There haven't been sidewalks around for that long.
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm wondering about too, but maybe it's a kind of a combination of spirits in the ground, yeah, and newly, you know, the lopped onto the fact that we cover the ground with concrete, but we leave those cracks.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
one of the other sites says this superstition originated back in the late 19th and 20th century. Unfortunately, it was when racism was prevalent. And at one time, if it was step on a crack and your mother's baby will be black, and it had to do
Oh,
with
gosh.
racism.
I didn't hear that.
Yes, and I think over time it has evolved. However, there is some other, you know, there are other explanations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's interesting. So I did see also, I don't know if any of you heard of an antidote? Some of these, superstitions have antidotes, something you should do to alleviate your problem of going through this, walking under the ladder, or just having the bad luck of, crossing with a black cat. But the walking under a ladder did have a specific antidote. Has anybody heard of that?
Not about the one with the letter, but there are a few about some other things. Like if someone steps on your foot, you step on their foot so that you don't get into an argument. There's one like that.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's just Russian, but in Russia, if you step on someone's foot, then you're gonna step on their foot back. Some people do it with force. And then there is like, if you step over a child, you have to step over back, otherwise they're not gonna grow.
So you step back the other
I
way.
remember all of that.
Yeah.
What's the ladder antidote?
So the ladder antidote is that you place your thumb between your index and middle fingers and hold it for at least 5 seconds. And then you take both hands with your thumbs in between your middle fingers, and both hands make the sign of the cross, and that protects you from the evil that you've stirred up by walking underneath that ladder.
So it's not gonna work if you're Jewish.
Yeah, maybe you could use some tracing the Star of David or something.
It's
Well,
curious
that-
to me, Paul, that although we saw in the video that different countries have different numbers that they're superstitious about,
Yeah.
even though it's not 13, it's curious that all countries seem to have a number that is bad luck.
Yeah. Yeah, and so and that's the kind of the interesting origin stories that something happens to somebody, they start talking about it, it becomes gets into literature or some kind of folklore or storytelling, and then it gets picked up by somebody else, and then you're off to it. And the same thing seems to happen with lucky numbers too. Like certain countries and certain cultures have lucky numbers. A lot of people, the Trinity have the number 3 is a very special and auspicious number. And I think it was in some Asian countries, the number 8 and also the number 12. So there's, lots of lucky numbers too that are associated with various stories.
In addition to lucky numbers, though, there are all the sort of counter traditions and mythologies about what will bring you good luck, as opposed to all the things that we're talking about that might be bad. The Southern custom of eating Hoppin' John on New Year's Day. There's certain things, if you do them and do them the right way,
Right.
only good fortune is going to come your way.
Yeah. Also, I looked at the the kind of the intersection between rituals and superstitions. And rituals, they found especially were strong with athletes and with lots of professional athletes, and that would be wearing a certain type of sock or wearing some other thing under. Michael Jordan wore some other jersey underneath his regular jersey. Serena Williams bounces the ball 5 times before her first serve and 2 times before her second serve. And lots of athletes have different rituals. And they said that, in some ways, all these things are to alleviate some type of anxiety. It's unfortunate in some ways in the superstition, you created your own anxiety, and then you have to alleviate it. But with with some of the ritual events that and they found that students also have various rituals, like before taking tests, and the theory is that are really anxiety producing events, and that you want to do your best, and you can do your best, and you try to prepare, but you also want a little bit of an edge, and you want to know that you have a little bit of control. So you do these rituals, And especially if they work a couple times, then why not? There's no real cost to bouncing the ball 5 times or putting on, your lucky socks. Other than you have to do your laundry a lot if you have a lot of games together. But, so that was the theory why these rituals and some of the things, rituals and superstitions and also prejudices, there's a lot of kind of overlap and fuzzy boundaries between some of these things. That was kind of
Excuse me. I have a question for Maya.
yeah.
Maya, my father was Russian, and I am remembering that as a child, whenever something ailed me, he always shoved a Google Moogle under my nose to drink. A Google Moogle contained raw egg and whatever else, and it was horrible. And I used to run away and try to hide, but eventually I had to drink this god awful stuff. So I wanted to ask Maya what she knows about the Google Moogle.
It's pronounced Gogol Mogol.
Gogol Mogol, that's it.
Right.
So tell me what you know about that.
I was never made to drink it. I don't know, because my father was a doctor and knew better. But I know of it. It's not considered a disgusting drink. It's considered a dessert, actually. Maybe your father didn't do it right. It's a tasty thing, Gogol Mogol. Yes, it has a raw egg, but there's some other ingredients in it. I can look it up as we're talking and see what other ingredients are in it.
It was awful. It was
Gogol Mogol is a dessert, actually.
So maybe your relatives, Maya, maybe they had a better way of sweetening it to make it a dessert.
Never actually having to drink it.
Yeah.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah.
But now that you said that, there is a very famous Russian children's writer, Chukovsky. I don't know if anyone ever, not Tchaikovsky like the composer, Chukovsky. He was the children's writer, and every Russian child knows him by heart, I think. So there is a poem about a doctor, a vet, an animal doctor, who's going to Africa to treat animals. And one of the things in the poem that he gives to them is Gogol Mogol. So I'm looking up right now what the ingredients are.
Give us the recipe.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, let her
It's eggs and sugar and dark flour from like rye bread, butter. That doesn't sound right.
Has egg in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, egg, and you drink it. You drink it.
So I know that they usually say that raw egg helps with the voice. So maybe they were giving it to people who had sore throat. But raw egg, if you drink raw egg, like I know singers will drink raw egg to help wake up the voice. So I think that's part of it, like that it helps the throat, the sore throat.
It's the most horrible thing I had to endure as a child. Those drinks of Gogol Mogol. And I used to hide, but ultimately I always had to drink it.
Well, it doesn't look very appealing on the picture that I'm looking at. 5 egg yolks, powdered sugar, a lemon, and rum. So you're probably not even an alcoholic drink, but there you go. That's the recipe.
Sounds like something my dad used to do, liquor for colds and sore throats, some kind of hard liquor.
Paul, early on in your video, they made a reference to Judas as maybe being the 13th figure at the Last Supper. And, he is almost always traditionally portrayed as being the bad guy, but for betraying Jesus to the Romans. But there was a writer, Nicholas Kazantzakis, I think was his name, came out with the idea that Judas was actually the most dedicated of the disciples and was assigned by Jesus to carry out the most, the assignment of portraying, of giving Jesus away, revealing him to the Romans, because I think, and Jesus recognized that if he, lived to be an old man, died of old age, Alzheimer's or whatever, he would never have founded the religion, that it was really necessary for him to be crucified by the Romans in order to jumpstart Christianity as a religion. So Judas really was the hero of the story rather than the villain. Had you heard that one
I've
before?
heard that before.
I have heard
think
that before.
The Da Vinci Code, no, Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. He talks about that in there, that like the whole Christian dogma is not how Jesus intended it, and like there's a whole explanation of what Judah was and why he betrayed Jesus Christ, Christ, and so on. It's a good book if anyone is looking for a good book.
There's a whole subset of Christians who that follow a man by the name of Rene Girard, who said that Christ was the suffering sacrificial lamb who he had to die. He had to die to redeem mankind's perpetual state of sin. And the only path to salvation was to have this innocent victim, which is Jesus Christ, and therefore requiring Judas. So take your pick here. A lot to choose from.
Yeah. Well, that would be the martyr kind of theory, and maybe some people would think of 13 as a special number that way.
Yeah, that's right. Is there anything like that in Judaism? That is, does the number 13 have any special significance?
Not to my knowledge, but that would be something interesting to talk to, some of that was one of the things I was going to ask Rabbi Renee to look up about, because there are certain numbers that are more propitious, I think, from the Torah, so.
I know 18 is supposed to be lucky.
Right. Yeah. And you give donations and denominations of 18.
But that's because the Hebrew equivalent is the word chai, or life. So
that's associated with 18.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, age 13 for Jewish boys and girls, but the mitzvah, that there is there, other than the sort of mental and physiological maturation, is there any other theological or any kind of significance to that?
I don't know of any. Does anybody else? Yeah. I think it's just maturation. What about the number 7 I have up here?
Oh boy.
Does anybody have a relationship to the number 7 or with this issues of, mirrors do seem to have, some spookiness to it too. I know that I remember, looking in the mirror in the nighttime and other kids trying to get me scared about looking in the mirror and having some spirit come out of the mirror and repeating the name Mary Worth to the mirror, and just mirrors in general, I think have a.
Of course, in dice, 7 and 11 are the two numbers that have a significance, and when that's where the 7-Eleven store might have gotten its name. But people who shoot dice, if you roll a 7 on the first time, that's good. It means you win. But if you don't get a 7 the first time, then a 7 ends your string or ends your play. So 7, and I'm not sure how 11 got into it, but 7 is the significant number for gamblers in rolling dice.
Yeah. I wonder if that 7 came from this bad luck thing, the mirror and the bad luck, because I got a feeling that this was probably something that goes back.
Well, it's either good luck or bad luck, depending on when you get it. It's good luck if you get it for starters, but bad luck if you get it after that.
Yeah.
If it's the mirrors, there is a lot of like fortune guessing with mirrors. And like as girls, we would do, you put 2 mirrors in, facing each other, and then you put 2 burning candles in between, and you can see those candles for like ever and ever and ever and ever. And then one of the, and you do it on the night of Christmas, so January 6 to 7, Orthodox Christmas. sit down in front of those mirrors, and that's how you see your future fiance looking into those mirrors.
Uh-huh.
We used to do it a lot as girls. It's actually pretty scary if you keep looking into that hallway of never-ending candles. You're gonna end up seeing something because of the flames.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh,
It was fun.
Yeah. And horseshoes.
horseshoes.
Yeah, so this is good luck.
This cow up in the right-hand corner with the horseshoes.
I think that was just artistic, some way of making fun. I think they were probably thinking about a horse and horseshoes, but they wound up with the friendly cow. And
Well, that's a
I
horse,
think
I
it's a
guess.
horse also.
yeah, and supposedly lucky if you find it, and lucky if you find it still with the nails in it, and the nails are supposed to help find, get you even more luck. And placing the entrance over the entrance of your home with the open end up is what gathers the good luck for you. And I
How
noticed,
come he's not on my screen? He's up in the corner. Why can you put him full screen?
yeah, it should be. If you might have to do it on your computer. On my computer, it's on the full screen.
And mine
okay.
as well.
Mine
okay.
too.
So something
It says
you
I'm
have-
viewing Paul's screen, but I don't think I am. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
viewing Maya.
Is there a way to click on speaker view or something like that?
View options, it says.
Yeah. Try this one.
I don't exit the full screen.
If
How
you
about
put your mouse on the very top of your screen, there are kind of different views you can see. You can speaker view. If you click on speaker view, there's a gallery view. So then
Oh, I got an umbrella and a black cat when I did that.
Yeah.
That's the full screen.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've had any experience with this, but it's funny. I've had experience coming into various offices with an umbrella, and I have a nice big golf umbrella. And my fear is not of the umbrella. My fear is of the mold and mildew on my stuff. So my instinct as soon as I come in with the wet umbrella is to open it up, shake it out, and put it somewhere so it dries out. And I've gotten people really nervous, about this issue of putting it out. And so supposedly that this idea that it offends the sun god if you're using it inside. And it may signify impending death or ill fortune if the person opens this up inside of the home. So, and I do have people that, that I've, made very nervous by opening this umbrella, but I don't know how else you would get it to dry out.
what's more important, a dry umbrella or a sun god being upset?
Well, I suppose if you really thought
You
the
can't
sun
risk it, Paul.
was going to go away and we were going to go without sun, I suppose I'd have to go with a mildewy umbrella. It just has worked for me that to dry it out seems to be okay. This is one, Marilyn, I think I've had you knock on wood and twice to reverse bad luck. Do you remember being taught this or learning about knocking on wood?
Oh, I've heard knock on wood.
I've heard the expression, but I don't know the origin.
Yeah. So one of the
So
things
that one is probably the most common in Russia, knock on wood. Like if something good is happening, you're gonna knock on wood so it continues to happen.
Yeah.
So like if I say, all my children have been so healthy, I'm gonna knock on wood, I'm doing it right now. So then they continue to stay healthy because you don't want to spoil it, jinx it.
Yeah. So
I thought it had something to do with spirits of some
Yes.
sort, but I don't remember this full story.
That's what I read too, is that, back in time that various cultures believed that gods inhabited trees and to ask them for a favor, you would tap on the bark of the tree, and that got translated into wood. So you would knock twice on there, and Christians.
So that one's like the most pagan superstition. It's probably
Yeah.
very
But then
old.
the interesting thing too is, though, then after a while, the Christians thought this knocking on wood would be like knocking on the cross, Jesus's cross. So they, but I think you're probably right, Maya, that it was very much of a pagan thing, and then that Christian people, adopted it and then transferred that over to the cross. Yeah, but it's very common, and my grandmother did this, often did knocked on wood for things, and my mother a little less so, but my grandmother quite a bit would always do that one. And the last one was that I had was God bless you. When you do say that, also arising, they said in the 6th century Europe, believed that a person was expelling evil spirits when they sneezed, and bless you would keep the home safe. And during the Black Plague, Pope, proposed that everybody should be required to bless people when they sneezed, and sometimes make the sign of the cross for good measure. And the bless you is something that, it feels like really not right if somebody sneezes and nobody says, God bless you or bless you. So it's almost like, it seems like a requirement that people do that, or, something. It's not that I feel like something bad would happen, but I do feel like it's
a polite thing to do.
Yeah, it's not right. Like if somebody sneezes, somebody in the room has to say bless you. As long as it's somebody, it's okay. But if it's nobody, that seems like it's not right. And I don't know why nobody ever said that to me. It's just I've come to just out of tradition, feel like that's the way it should be. So I was curious what the rest of you thought about that.
I wonder if it's common because sneezing happens all the time, so you hear, as you're growing up or whatever, you hear it all the time, versus some of the other superstitions like under a ladder or a black cat. You might never run into the circumstances of crossing the path of a black cat or near a ladder, but you're always going to be at some point in the winter around people who are sneezing. So
right. So yeah, the bless you would be reinforced many times over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like the knock on wood, I think the same thing, I remember hearing that a lot.
Right.
Just because you're always around, you're frequently around circumstances where, you want to ward off the evil spirits. I know in our family, when there was a wedding or a bar bas mitzvah, we'd always have to wear a red ribbon, and that was supposed to, I think, ward off evil spirits. Or so.
I hadn't heard that.
And you wonder about the connection, that never thought about it, but that whole notion of sneezing or coughing in the COVID era, and the spitting in the 19th and early 20th century, that whole notion of that you removing bodily fluids either through nasally or coughing or spitting. This was somehow, a thing to be avoided, and there's a social stigma attached to people who do this. I mean, if you sneeze without shielding yourself and things. So that's interesting that there are sort of forces and things within us that we need to get rid of, but the act of doing that could be dangerous and unhealthy for others. Yeah, that's a fascinating possibility.
Yeah.
Baseball players particularly were notorious for constantly spitting, between swings of the bat or whatever. I think that's probably going to change for now if this COVID thing stays around for very long.
Oh, that's right.
Probably have a whole new family of of ways to react to sneezes and coughs and spitting.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of the spitting too was putting plugs of chewing tobacco in your cheek.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to swallow that.
In college, Maryland, I knew one of my friends was a semi-professional softball pitcher, and he chewed tobacco all day. And we were studying together in the evening, and he said, "Hey, you're looking tired." And I said, "I am tired." He said, "You need to try a little bit of chew." So he gives me-
Does that make your teeth color yellow?
It was terrible. I thought I was going to have to go to the emergency room because I swallowed too much.
Oh,
Oh,
So I swallowed, a bunch of it, and I was
Bull Durham or something, yeah.
I was very disorientated, and so he had to walk me home.
Doesn't that stain your teeth though, Paul?
Yeah,
It stains
sure.
your teeth.
of course.
and the worst thing is it would cause mouth and throat cancer if you do it all the time. I only did it. I did it once was enough for me for my whole life.
I worked for Uncle Sugar for 3 years. That's Uncle Sam on a submarine. And we had some good Southern boys. I'm a Yankee, but we had some good old Southern boys on that submarine who grew up spitting. That was part of their life. And they
Yeah.
had to have special regulations on the submarine to regulate this because most of us did not want these guys walking around
Sure.
spitting on a submarine, because we were so confined and you didn't have a lot of fresh air. And so special little things you had to work out.
So did they have buckets that they had to contain it in? And
No, we required, this is an old World War II submarine, not that I was in World War II, but no, we confined it to, they could do it in the toilets. We had a strict regulation. And of course that offended them because they wanted to spit, anywhere and everywhere, but we just sort of, had to clamp down and say, nope, if you're going to spit, you're going to do it here.
Bars in the West had spittoons or special pieces of furniture that designed to be spit in spittoon.
Yes,
You spit into
spittoon.
the spittoon and it makes a clang sound when it goes in. This was kind of a Western cowboy kind of thing, I think,
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
the saloon in the West.
well, that day's gone. Yeah. Okay. Well, anything else that this brought up for you about superstitions and rituals and good luck, bad luck?
Well, I just think it's interesting to find what are possible origins for our continued behavior or things that promote certain ideas. And sometimes over the continuum, whatever was the originating factor may have muted over time,
Yeah.
and then it becomes something else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a good illustration with the knocking on wood that, talk to the tree gods versus, Jesus Christ and maybe now just really something that people don't even know, it's just something that you do that your mother did or your grandmother did, that you have.
For a while, I was looking up, for example, when you'd hear the expression raining cats and dogs. So I would start looking up what's the origin of that. And some of them, in this case, at least what I read was that in olden days, when they had a cabin or a small house on the prairie, the roof was thatched either grasses or wheat or something like that. And when it would rain, it would become slippery. Well, the animals would go up on the roof. It was a good place to snuggle up, I suppose, and maybe there was food. Anyway, the cats and the dogs would slip off when it rained.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
So there is an adjunct to that.
Yeah.
There's one thing worse than raining cats and dogs, and that's hailing taxi cabs.
That's good, Marilyn.
But I think it is interesting to find out, because we use a lot of expressions like knock on wood or whatever it is. And I think it's really interesting to know, how it got started.
Yeah. Al Johnson's restaurant in Door County had
Oh, yeah.
goats, on the
Right.
ceiling. So I suppose if it got wet and slippery, it could be raining goats.
Absolutely. No kidding.
Oh. Yeah. All right.
Well, very interesting, Paul. Thanks for putting that together for
Yeah,
us this week.
Very
Thank you.
interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for everybody joining me and
Thanks.
all the stories, and I was interested to see what you all had experienced with those superstitions and things like that. So I think it's a good way to start out our Friday the 13th, and
Excellent way,
I think we'll all have a better day because of it.
I agree. I agree.
for sure.
Everyone be safe and be warm.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.